All right. There we go. Can I edit this after the fact? I mean, I guess I should have the comments going before I start this thing. I said a lot of good stuff there. Yeah, that's a good one. All right. Good morning. Hello. Closed captioning. Probably should have. Anyway, thanks for everybody telling me. So, God, that was 2 minutes of good stuff. Um, if you're watching this after the fact, you're just not going to watch it. I don't know how we're going to fix that. Fix it in post, I guess. So, good morning. If you're listening to the podcast, we've been doing some YouTube lives. John said, throw them on the podcast feed too. I said, it's a good idea. We might as well double dip on that sucker. So, if you're listening to the pod, check out the YouTube in the description. If you're watching the YouTube, listen to the podcast where there will be audio. A couple of reasons to talk about this today. Yesterday, we've talked a lot this week about how the Niners feel about Trey Lance. And I know yesterday Mayoko said the Niners do not have on CanBR, the Niners do not have enough information to tell you who the backup is going to be. I dispute the notion that the Niners have soured on Trey Lance. I think personally, in my opinion, they like him more than they ever have since they've had him with the Niners, but they just don't know how he will perform. So that's good. That's good information from Mayoko. I agree. They don't know how he's going to perform. We don't have enough information to say that Sam Darnold should be the backup over him. Wholeheartedly agree. And so I buy that. Like I buy the part that they're going to play it out. The part that they're higher on him than they've ever been, we'll see. But I think that I didn't even start this conversation because of that. A couple other factors I want to get into that are going to really affect any potential trade market. When we talked about this before the draft, John made a point that I think is a good point. It still holds up. If it's going to happen, a trade, it would happen around the trade deadline, right? Before November, in October. Maybe by that point, it's a weird combo though. For a stock to go up, he's got to play. If his stock goes up, then you want to keep him. But if he just doesn't play, Brock is balling. It's not even about him versus Sam. It's just Brock is the quarterback, and you view those two guys behind him equally, and so you try to get something for him. And there's some incentive for somebody to acquire him because we've heard this before. I'm rehashing it quickly because you want to get a little look before you have to pick up the 5th-year option in May, and you'd rather do that at the end of November, December than get him in the offseason and not have played him in any games, and then you're kind of blindly picking up the 5th-year option like the Panthers did with Sam Darnold. You want to be in that spot. So you get him, you play him for a month or two, and then you decide, what do we do? The problem with that is in that scenario, the Niners aren't really getting much back in compensation. The good thing for them would be in the end, if they're thinking about cutting, you trade and you save a little money on the cap versus a cut where the whole dead cap, $10 million in 24 comes. But I don't think they're going to do that. Brock is so cheap that if he's their quarterback, even Darnold is so cheap. The Niners historically, the Parag Marathe era, right? Pre-Shanahan, pre-Lynch, they operated with kind of a holistic view of their quarterback room's cost. If the whole thing is relatively cheap, then you can afford to spend a little bit, overpay a little bit more on another player. So I think it's unlikely he gets traded for a couple of reasons. The Mayoko information is interesting, but I'll add a couple more to it. This draft is going to be at the top really good. There are going to be two really good quarterbacks in this draft. Caleb Williams is the clear number one. So first of all, if you're a bad team, and I got a list here of teams. If you're a bad team, the first thing you want to do is get Caleb Williams. The second thing you want to do is get Drake May from North Carolina. He's going to be the second pick. And as we've seen in recent drafts, and we talked about this with the 18 draft when Baker went 1, but then the next 3 quarterbacks were all quarterbacks acquired by teams who traded up, that this is also going to be if let's just say the second worst team in the NFL is the Texans or the Colts or one of these teams that just drafted a quarterback, then it's going to be prime trade position as well. And so I think that there's going to be an effect on the trade market among bad teams because they would rather move up and get one of those 2 quarterbacks than try to find somebody mid 2023 season and then project that out for 2024. They're going to be focused on 24 already. Listening back to the John Lynch interview we did in 2017, right after the Niners won their first game, one of the questions was, well, what have you been up to? And this was around the time that the Niners acquired Jimmy Garoppolo. What John Lynch said they'd been doing was scouting the draft. They'd been going through the draft. They'd been watching the top players in the draft. So around the time the trade deadline rolls up, your scouts, your GM, your personnel people have already started getting a landscape. I also think there's going to be a couple other really good quarterbacks. By November, we'll know, or the end of October, we'll know, is Michael Penix from Washington, who was the nation's leading passer last year, is he having a good year? Is he going to be a first-round pick? I think he's going to be. I think he should be. I thought it was kind of wild that he wasn't a first. Maybe he would have been a second and just wanted to come back to school last year. But I think it's kind of wild that he wasn't in that position last year. So, here's the list of teams. I think if I'm missing somebody, tell me. But here's the list of teams that I think is going to be potentially. This is just the potentials. I try to make this list as big as possible, and then you pare it down. But it's less than half the league. Miami. Mike McDaniel knows him. If Mike McDaniel likes him, and it goes poorly with Tua, that could be an option, I guess. Tennessee, Rand Carthen. Okay. The Raiders, they got Jimmy G and Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell. Those are Shanahan-style quarterbacks, but maybe I loved Middlekauff's hypothetical. Maybe Trey plays well in a joint practice and Mark Davis falls in love with him. Maybe Sean Payton thinks, I can do this as a side project behind Russell, but Russell's so expensive, you can't have Trey Lance on that team with his money as your backup. Detroit, nope. They just drafted Hendon Hooker. So they're not going to – now Hendon's not going to be ready for the beginning of the season. Doesn't matter. He's going to probably start the season on the non-football injury list, but he'll be available week 5. And I'm not saying Goff isn't going to be playing by week 5, but they got a guy. Atlanta, they like Mariota. Okay, maybe. Maybe they're going to think we're going to be too good to move up. We got Ritter. We like him enough. Seems like a weird spot, but Washington, Sam Howell, Jacoby Brissett. It'd be a big statement for Eric Bieniemy if he could make Trey Lance. And defensive head coaches, which they have, tend to like running quarterbacks because those guys, do unpredictable things and make their lives hard as coordinators. But so I'd put Washington in the yes list. New England, you never know. Maybe they liked him. Now, Bill O'Brien's there, which is good news for Mac Jones. If Mac Jones can't get back on track or get on track this year, then that thing will be over. Okay, maybe. Minnesota, Kirk Cousins, Nick Mullins. They're going to replace him. Kwesi, Adolfo Mensa, bachelors from Princeton, a master's from Stanford. He's not giving you the third rounder. He's not giving you a fourth rounder. And keep in mind, he was a Niner, but he left the Niners before they drafted Trey Lance. That gets brought up a lot. Well, he was with the Niners in 2020. The Trey Lance draft was 21. He was with the Browns. Tampa, they should tank. Todd Bowles is probably not going to want to tank. It's year 2 for him, but they should tank. Like, to me, Tampa, Minnesota, these are teams that should be tanking, not teams that should be acquiring. And even if they're not tanking, I think, if you're bad and you're a 6-win team or a 5-win team, you are in range of trading up for a quarterback. You're not going to get the number 1 pick, right? I think it's really unlikely unless Houston or, Indianapolis, if one of those teams has the number 1 pick, then it means the year's gone bad. They may just double up and take Caleb Williams. I mean, Caleb Williams is the best quarterback prospect since Trevor Lawrence. Wasn't that long ago, but the second best since Luck, I would say. I think coming in, at least at this point, right? At this point, 1 year away from the draft, he is a better prospect than Joe Burrow was 1 year away from the draft. And by the time we got to the draft, everybody would have taken Burrow. But he is just an absolute lock, number 1 pick. You got to take Caleb Williams. So I think some of these teams here are not going to want to bring on a $5 or $10 million quarterback when they should, by that time of the year, late October, early November, if they're bad, which I think it's in their interest to be bad this year, they should have their minds squarely set on the draft. The other thing, you have to convince your owner anytime you do anything. And if you're acquiring Trey Lance, one question I would ask if I'm the owner is, all right, what's the history of players who failed in San Francisco for Kyle Shanahan succeeding somewhere else? What's that list look like? Dante Pettis? Is that the whole list? I was thinking this morning about, Kendrick Bourne, Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard, all these River Craycraft, all these guys that Kyle kind of liked. get opportunities elsewhere. He launches might be strong, but he helps careers. But how many guys that did not work out for the 49ers did not went on and made the 49ers look like it was their fault? It was Kyle's fault that person didn't succeed. I think Dante's the list, but give me a list. Brian on the stream. Trey was always a big project. Why draft a guy we can't develop? I think part of this is the Niners have shown they did this with Garoppolo. They're not in the business of just giving up if they don't have to. They're not going to give a guy away unless they don't like him. They're not going to give a guy away for a 5th round pick if they think there is any world in which they might use him. And I think that's how they're looking at Trey. So that's why I say I think it's under 50%. I mean, you look at the way the Niners have had things play out, the amount of time they've invested. If what Mayoko said is correct, that they still like him, then there is no incentive. Even the incentive of saving the $10 million in 2024, it's not that high because Brock is going to be making like the cost of a 4-bedroom home in San Antonio. So it's, there's not a lot of incentive to move on from Trey if he's still good in your locker room, if you like the guy, if you like the person, and if you still think maybe there's something there with the player. Here's the other thing. By October, it's easy right now to talk about, well, Darnold might be better than him. By October, we'll see. Right. Trey could easily be the backup quarterback by then. Trey could have played by then. Right. Just the way this thing goes. So, all right, here we go. Some comments. What happens if Brock doesn't come back the same, but worse? You trade Trey before that? You're really going to roll with Sam? No. First of all, you don't trade Trey before that. That's why I was not an advocate of trading Trey before the draft or during the draft, because I'm like, what? You got one healthy quarterback all of a sudden that's Sam Darnold? Even if Brock does come back, I'll counter this question with even if Brock does come back the same, as just as good or better, you still is Sam Darnold. Let's just say Brock is your guy. Like, we like Brock. Is Sam your backup for the next 2 years? I think you got to keep Trey around in that scenario. Has there ever been a more poorly managed top 3 QB draft pick in NFL history? It's tough. I mean, has anybody had a top 3 failure and then gone to the NFC Championship game? Like I saw somebody in one of the comments said Trey's the most scrutinized quarterback of all time. No, he's not. That's not true, right? Donovan McNabb would have something to say about that. Steve Young would probably have something to say about that. Cam Newton, I think, was pretty heavily scrutinized. Jay Cutler was pretty heavily scrutinized. I know that's not what you're saying, Christopher, but yeah, I mean, this happens. Like, what doesn't happen is it generally kind of torpedoes your franchise for a couple of years. Here we have the 18 draft or the 21 draft. The guys got drafted 2 and 3 are now not their team starters, and their teams both think they can, go to the Super Bowl. The Jets with Zach Wilson and the Niners. What about the guy from North Carolina? He's going to be a very highly touted prospect, Drake May. He's going to be the number 2 pick. I mean, and if it wasn't for Caleb Williams, he'd be the number 1 pick. Yeah, I mean, SC quarterbacks don't turn out well, is the comment. Lincoln Riley's quarterbacks also, Baker Mayfield did not live up to the hype, and Kyler, we'll see. But, I think Caleb's going to break both of those molds. Kid Lou says, any truth to the commentary that Lance lacks the speed to threaten the outside with runs, thus negating his perceived value in Shanahan's system when they draft him? We talked about that all yesterday, Kid Lou, so go watch yesterday's video. I'm not going to rehash it too much for the people that we did that yesterday. But go check that out. Because there is some truth to him not being great as a runner. The quick synopsis of it, yeah, I thought he hasn't looked comfortable from the beginning, but that shouldn't fail him for this test. Trade to the Saints. Yeah, the Saints don't need more quarterbacks right now. The Saints have plenty of quarterbacks at this moment. Yeah, this is a good word. This comment. Sam makes poor decisions under fire. I agree. One of the things that I think maybe Colin said it Darnold, if he just does what you tell him to do when he was talking to Schlereth, then you're fine. It's when he tries to ad-lib that you get into trouble. Yeah, I mean, you see that when you watch him. He holds on to the ball too long. Darnold holds on to the ball too long. Kyle is not going to like that. So to go back to what Mayoko said, it's 100% fair to say whatever happens in OTAs, whatever you thought coming out of that if you were Kyle, and whatever happens in camp, you still need to watch these guys play games, real bullets. And let's see. The stuff we say about Trey, we got to see him in games. The same applies to Darnold. The same thing applies to Darnold. We got to see him in games, not hold on to the ball too long, make quick decisions, and do what Kyle is telling him to do. Because I don't think Sam's MO to this point has been just cleanly run the offense, hit everybody in stride, get the ball out in 2 seconds, and then, jog up to the line of scrimmage for second down and short. That has not been that's not been the same Darnold experience yet. So third string All-Pro. Niners didn't mismanage Lance. Brock Purdy came in, threw a wrench in the plans. Purdy looked bad. Lance starts week 1. Nobody cries about management. If Purdy looked bad, what do they do? Do they trade for Kirk Cousins this offseason? Would they have just rolled back and gone, Purdy wasn't the answer after Jimmy got hurt last year? I think, Trey had to have that second surgery, so he would not have just come right back. I don't, this is a good question. In that hypothetical world, I would have been a little surprised if they had just rolled it back this year. We'll do the same thing we did in 22. It'll just be Trey Lance's team again. I'd be a little surprised by that. I think they would have done something. Holding my judgment till camp begins. Yeah. No reason to give up on Trey. Cheap depth. Here's another one. I don't think people can talk enough about the scenario where Brock comes back worse. Keeping Trey to compete with him seems like a must. Well, I don't think he's coming back worse physically, but 100% think it's a real conversation to have that he hasn't played that much NFL football. And, extrapolating 5, 6, 7, 8 games from a player and saying that's just who that guy, especially at this position, right? And saying that's who that guy is. That's who he's going to be this season. That's who he's going to be for the rest of his career. That is not the way the position works. It's not the way the sport works, right? So 5 starts, 67%, 13 touchdowns, 4 picks. We're talking about over the course of 17 weeks, all those percentages, those are MVP numbers, right? So it's absolutely fair to say that he may not have a 4.25 to 1 touchdown interception ratio. I mean, if he does, then you're a Super Bowl contender. Period. I mean, you're in the NFC Championship game you're in the NFC Championship game if Brock Purdy has a 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio over the course of a full season. And you're going to win 13 or 14 games. And he's going to be he's not going to be the MVP candidate, but he's going to be a dark horse. I mean, like all of that stuff. That's how good that is. So, yeah, it's fair to say, is it going to be that good? 67, is it going to be that good again? The question is, where does he settle in? And does it have to be that good, right? I mean, we would say those numbers that we just projected are so good. Call it what? Let's just, I mean, I'm not going to, whatever it is, 30 mid 30s touchdown passes and single digit, or maybe low double digit interceptions. You just don't project that for guys who've only played 5 games. So the possibility that you end up seeing multiple quarterbacks this year is extraordinarily high based on Brock just got hurt the last time we saw him, and Kyle's air quotes loyalty runs out quickly. Loyalty's not the right word. He treats quarterback, kind of like he treats other positions. If I think this other guy can be better right now today, then I'm going to do that. Right. Is Brock Purdy another Matt Castle? Ibis World commented that. I have not thought about that. I think he's a better player than Matt Castle, but that's interesting. I mean, Matt had a great year when Brady was out, and That's interesting. Now, Matt had played basically no college football, right? Wasn't it? Had he played no games or thrown like one pass at USC? I mean, it was wild, right? Because of how good that quarterback situation was. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Whether that's the correct comp or not, there aren't that many comps like it. The one I've been using is just Geno Smith last year, who 8 games looked like an MVP, and then the second half didn't. You know, here's the one thing. Now they're killing Trey's stock. It's mismanaged. I don't think they're all that interested in Trey stock. I don't think there's much stock to kill. I go back to that list. This is where the draft comes into play. If you are a team who thinks you're going to be in the quarterback market in 2024, right? Miami might make a decision on Tua. Minnesota knows they're going to be in the quarterback market. Tampa is going to be in the quarterback market. And you know that the draft upcoming has premium quarterback prospects, 2 of them, Caleb Williams and Drake May. You know you might need a 3rd round pick, a 2nd round pick, a 4th round. You might need all those picks to move up in the draft to number 2 and get one of these guys, okay? You are not using any ammunition of any value to trade for Trey Lance, whose track record is very tiny right now. Hell, you might have guys in some of those front offices who evaluated him out of college and said, I don't really like him. So those guys are not going to come back now and give you a 3rd round pick. If they did like him, they're still not going to come back now. And if Rand Carthen really believes in him, he's going to convince. Rand Carthen is not the boss in Tennessee, right? Mike Vrabel is the boss. So he, new guy, is going to convince Mike Vrabel we should give up a 3rd round pick for Trey Lance. Mike's going to say, you better be right, because I've gone to the playoffs in this division with Ryan Tannehill. So you're going to give up a 3rd round pick? A 4th round, even a 4th. I think a 4th is, you're not getting that right now. So, you know, what stock? What are we talking about here? That's where I disagree with that they're hurting his trade stock. They are not thinking about that. They are not thinking about that. They are thinking, if Brock can't play week 1, how do we win? How do we beat the Steelers? If Brock gets hurt, if our quarterbacks get hurt, how do we go to the playoffs? How do we go to the NFC Championship game? Now you go to the Super Bowl, what's coming out of the AFC is something else entirely. But how do you get to the NFC Championship game, right? I think that's kind of how you look at it. Now, you play the Steelers week 1. Kenny Pickett. I didn't have them on this list, but let's say Brock's not ready. And let's say Trey does beat out Sam Darnold and he starts week 1 against the Steelers and he beats this and he looks good. Now we're talking about stock again. Right? Now we're talking about stock again. A guy called Ed asks, if you are Trey and the 49ers reject your 5th-year option, would you still consider re-signing a la Daniel Jones? A lot of people are going to say no. I would say yes to that. I would say yes. Now, the 5th-year option is coming up in May of 2024, right? But, and it's 21, 22, 23, 24. It's for 25, right? But yes, I would consider sticking around, because if they still want you around by then, you've beaten out Sam Darnold, or Sam Darnold's gone, or you're not the number 3 quarterback, right? Because they're not going to want to sign you. If you're their 3rd quarterback, in all likelihood, you're not going to want to do that. But I do think there's a world where you look at it and go, this has not gone well for my on-field development here. And I do need to play, right? And so maybe ultimately that's why you would go, right? As you talk it out, you go, but I need to play. I played 2 games in 2019. No, I played 2 games in 2018, kind of like mop up duty as a red shirt. I played a full season in 2019. I played 1 game in 2020. And then I've averaged a couple of games since. So maybe by that scenario, you go, yeah, I'm out of here. The flip side would be, if Kyle still likes you, again, the situation with Trey notwithstanding, quarterbacks do tend to benefit from playing for Kyle Shanahan. So I think a lot of people would say that's a hard no. I would say it's a maybe, But let's get there. Let's see how this year plays out, because it might be a complete non-starter just based on, as we talked through, the fact that he just really needs to play. Yeah, you're not getting paid like Danny Dimes did either. That's a good point. Jedi says, I would. Well, I don't know my ego, but for Trey, it might be his best career move if it's not a pride thing. It might be, sticking around Kyle Shanahan as a quarterback is not terrible. But again, as I talked myself out of that a little bit, you do need to just find a place to play and to play and to play. And so that might, but we're a ways away from that. This could be the place he plays in 2023. He could be playing, who knows? Who knows? Now, 2024, well, we'll get to Kirk Cousins. That's another conversation for another time. So, there's the list of teams. I'm sure there's always some curveballs. But as I said, I think two factors here really make it difficult. You're not trading much if you're a quarterback needy team this year, because you're going to want to save your ammo for the draft. And it doesn't mean you're drafting number one, right? The worst team drafts number one, and this year they are not trading that pick unless they are a team that just drafted a quarterback and had the worst record in the league, but still kind of likes that guy. Somebody mentioned Arizona. Sure, we could add Arizona. But there might be a quarterback at 9 or 11 that you want to trade up and get. I think by late October, we'll know if Michael Penix Jr. at Washington is a Heisman candidate again. Then he might be the third quarterback drafted next year. He's a really good player who's had a long injury history. He's a little old, but he could step in, I think, and win you football games right away. I think if he's healthy, he's a high floor guy with a much higher ceiling than Mac Jones. So what does that get you? That gets you in the top 12, right? And so you need, if you're going to be at 15, if you're going to be the number 12, the 12th worst team in the league, and you're trying to get to 9, you need first and second and third rounders. You need picks to do that. So if you're a quarterback needy team in a QB draft that's going to be intriguing, you really don't have much incentive. And if you're the Niners, you don't have much incentive to trade him for a 6th-round pick when he could be, he'd be playing the NFC Championship game by the end of the year. So I think those factors, and then you add to it, Mayoko said he thinks they like him right now. I think all those factors combined lead to a world in which Trey Lance, it's more likely than not that he's not traded. I think it's under 50%, but we'll see. We'll let this thing play out. I mean, we'll let it play out as we talk about it every day, which is fine with me. All right. Thanks for hanging. It's Friday. We got to get on with things. Get on with the day. Hit that like button, subscribe to it on the way out. Oh, also, I didn't throw this up there. If you're watching, if you're listening, use the code HAM. You're going to a game this weekend. You're going to buying some concert tickets. Somebody DM'd me yesterday, said I'm buying some Niner tickets. I'm using code HAM for the Jags game. $20 off with the GameTime app. You're going to baseball. You're going to see a show. $20 off with the GameTime app there. And that's that. So have a great weekend. Well, I don't know. We'll be back here in the morning. Next take coming soon, maybe. And keep those takes coming. Thanks for checking it out. Like, subscribe, share. Let everybody.